Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kristen Hammett, and I am the Director of Ministry Services here at the Signatory. We are so happy that you have carved out some time. Perhaps you are having your second or third cup of coffee, or grabbing lunch, or perhaps just getting back after lunch. Wherever you find yourself in your day, I trust that the next 30 to 45 minutes will be time well spent as we learn together about maximizing mid-level giving. As many of you know, our goal here at the Signatory Ministry Services is to equip you in your development efforts and partner with you in major donor conversations. As you develop your donor relationships, you can view us as a key resource for training, community, and partnership as you work with donors. So I want to send a couple of quick reminders your direction. I communicate these on a pretty regular basis, but I want you to continue to engage with us, first of all, on our Facebook group. That is a place not only where we share some information, but other ministry leaders like yourself also engage and share both questions, thoughts, and comments. So certainly encourage you to engage there, and then connect with me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn really is a thriving community of business leaders, nonprofit leaders, ministry leaders, and so I would encourage you to be active on LinkedIn and connect with me there as I share some tidbits and some great articles and research from time to time. And then finally, pass this webinar and webinars like it on to others within your own organization and those friends that you've met in organizations that are doing great work in your community and across the country. We don't want to keep this information secret. We work hard to bring new, relevant, subject matter experts to you that are concerning not only your nonprofit ministry growth, but also just donor development in general. So this is really great information, and we certainly want to hold it open-handed and share it with those not only engaged today, but who may also be in your sphere of influence. All right, final reminder, today is a conversation. It is not just a presentation. So I want to encourage you to ask questions throughout today's presentation. I will take note of those and ask Mike as we go throughout the presentation. I will be facilitating those questions. So please share with us where you're at in this conversation, what you're thinking, and what questions you may have. All right, so here we go. Maximize mid-level giving. As we all stand really on the edge of fourth quarter, beginning next week, we want to make sure that you are equipped to communicate with all segments of your donor database. It's so important that we are communicating effectively with each of those different donors. And I'll be frank with you, as a development officer, I really had two donor segments. I had major donors and everybody else. And I know there are better ways to do it, and that's what we're going to bring to you today. A really thoughtful mid-level donor strategy from an expert in the field. So we are privileged to learn from Mike Myers today, not the Saturday Night Live star from the 90s or Austin Powers, but in fact, really a nonprofit expert. He has had lots of experience in the field, and you are in for a treat. Mike has served as Chief Development Officer for two large nonprofits, and then recently as CEO for Food for the Hungry. During his time at Food for the Hungry, he led a lot of global planning and strategy efforts that have resulted in significant growth and success for that organization. And now he is serving as a consultant. So he has generously offered his time to share with us some key insights into this mid-level giving. So Mike, welcome. I'm so excited to have you as our guest today.
Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate it. It's good to be here. You know, every time I go through the airport, it's the time you have to pull out your license, and everybody makes fun of me because they're like, oh, I'm sure you never hear this about your name. And it's probably inappropriate in the TSA line at the airport, but I usually tell them, Yeah, I'm also Michael Myers, which is the killer in the Halloween movies. Depending on how this goes, we'll see which one comes out. But it's probably not the best thing to do in an airport security line.
Probably not.
Well, thanks. So excited to be here and talk about mid-level giving. It's been something I've worked on for a while. There's actually a book coming out called Maximize the Middle. I wrote with Dale Berkey, and it'd be a good resource for you as well. It's not, I was hoping that we'd have it up by this week, but it'll probably be available on Amazon probably sometime next week. But it's called Maximize the Middle by Mike Myers and Dale Berkey. So if you want to go deeper into this topic, just put a little plug there now that you can pick that up. I have 6 boxes sitting in my living room, but I'm just definitely not a shipping service. So, you'll have to wait for it to show up on Amazon. So Kristen already talked about me a little bit, but I thought I'd just throw out too. I worked for probably about 15 years ago. I went to work for a guy who was doing major donor consulting. And I started looking at files and learning just tons of stuff from him at the time. And it was very interesting. I started asking questions like, hey, what are we doing with these donors that are giving $1,000 to $10,000 or $1,000 to $5,000 a year? And his comment was, I don't know, go figure it out. Because we were looking at major donors, for some larger organizations and just drawing the line at either $5,000 or $10,000, but weren't looking at this middle group. So he said, hey, go figure it out. Let's sort this out. So I've had the last 15 years kind of playing around in this mid-level space and done a lot of discovery. So hopefully you can pick up some of that today. My email address is here at the bottom. If you have questions after this, feel free. It'll be on the last slide as well. So don't worry. So what you'll learn here, what we're going to go over, just a couple things here today is why organizations should focus on mid-level donors. Why is this an important place for you to invest? Second, the profile of a mid-level donors. Every organization is going to look a little bit different, but we can give you a general frame of who mid-level donors are, characteristics, demographics, some of that. Third, how to identify your mid-level donors. I like to be really practical. So when you walk away from here today, you can go, okay, here's 4 things that I can go do at my organization. No matter whether you're a one-person show or if you're part of a team of 50 people. Hopefully we'll have something that you can walk away with today. And then lastly, what do you do to start a mid-level donor program? If you don't have one, where can you start? And if you do have one, is there a place where you can grow? So why mid-level donors? So one of the things is they tend to generate a great net return. And here's what I mean by that. If you have a donor that's giving $25 a year, and you have another donor who's giving $1,000 a year, and you're investing the same amount of money in both of those donors, it might take $25 a year to cultivate a donor. Well, you just spent all your money on cultivating a $25 donor, right? In hopes that we get a second gift. But if you have a $1,000 donor and you spent the same $25, I've even argued, I've argued to people many times, that's probably too great of return. We should probably invest a little bit more money into that person so that we can get them to the next gift and really keep them around for a long time. So they tend to be consistent givers over time. Mid-level donors are the people, they may not write the biggest check, but they're going to give consistently, probably give multiple times through the year, and they're going to stay around for a long time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Higher retention rates than general donors. So we're going to keep these people around, and you're going to keep them around even longer if you're able to implement some of the things we talk about here today. Larger lifetime value. So because they stay around for a long time, because they're giving larger gifts than general donors, it's a great place to invest. I mean, a big chunk of your organization's money can come from this middle section that for years really was ignored by a lot of nonprofits. Very few were paying attention to this group of donors that were in the middle. And for some organizations that we work with, they provide more than 1/3 of the organization's revenue. So when we started writing this book, I found this really interesting because I thought maybe we'll get like 10% to fall in the mid-level space. And that's true for some organizations. But some organizations, it was like, there was one large organization that we do consulting with. When we looked at this because of how their people give, it was over 1/3 of people fell into this mid-level space. And for that organization, it was $1,000 to $10,000. Fell into this space. So we said, oh man, we've got to start doing something to really influence this group of donors. Also, form a high potential pool of major donor candidates. So I don't know how you work with moves management or if you know about moves management, but it's this idea of moving somebody who gives a single gift. So we're doing acquisition and bringing someone on the first time. Then you want to move them to a second gift. Then your organization may want to move them to multi-gifts or monthly giver. And then some of those will start giving larger gifts over time. We move them into this mid section if you can focus on mid levels. And then we move them to major. So your mid-level donor reps, or if you're paying attention to mid-levels, you might be able to, some of those people are going to be good mid-levels for a long time. Other people in the process, you're going to realize like, man, this person just, I use ridiculous examples sometimes, but it's like you're talking to a mid-level on the phone who gave you $1,000 and then all of a sudden they say, oh yeah, well, we just sold our oil well drilling company in Texas and, trying to figure out what to do with that money. You go, oh, radar goes up and you go, man, I should probably pass that off to the major donor, or realize if you're a one-person show, I need to start talking to them about bigger gifts than $1,000. Often willing to include nonprofit organization in their will or estate. This is huge. If you're not doing marketing out to mid-level donors about what happens to their money when they die, you need to start doing it. You can talk to Kristen more about this, but this is a big one that we've started putting a lot of focus on, is trying to mass market and talk to people and even start to introduce that in conversations with mids, not just majors, because a lot of estates, even they won't be as big, but a lot of estates are coming from mid-level donors, giving their largest gift, when they die, not during their lifetime. They're usually former general donors who are inspired to give more than before. So part of that moves management we talked about. And these people also become great advocates for the organization. Your mid-level donors are going to be some of your biggest fans if you can figure out a way to engage them and keep them moving along with the organization. So we've talked a little bit about why. So let's talk about, just for a couple of minutes, who are mid-level donors generally? So generally a mid-level donor, 65% female. This is a very important stat if you're trying to figure out how you communicate or who you hire to put on the phone to talk to mids. You got to consider that. I actually just got a message today on one of the clients we're working with that was contacted by a rep who's a little bit more of an aggressive male tone on the voice on the phone. And the donor actually requested to not be contacted on the phone anymore. And we said, hey, maybe let's put a softer personality on the phone. One of our men or women who's a softer personality, you're going to have women from all different, whether they are strong leaders or people who are a little bit wired differently. You got to find the right rep with the right person. So it's really important to understand where people are coming from, not just gender, but what do they do? Are they a CEO of a company? So if 65% are female, is she a CEO? Is she a stay-at-home mom? Who is she? Figure out who she is so you can match her up with the right rep, because that's really important. We're all wired different. Age 50 to 64. A big reason why that's the case is because they're in peak earning years and probably not paying for college anymore. I don't know about you, but 50 years is a little young for me to not be paying for college. I had my kids a little later, so I'll still be paying for college then. But anyway, that's why that age group. They usually give additional gifts. They'll give additional rather than larger gifts. So don't discount somebody just because they give $1,000. They may give you $1,000 5 times during the year. Suburban homeowners, often prosperous couples in peak earning years. So we just talked about that. I'll be interested to see how this stat changes as the world's population is moving more towards city centers, more urban living. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes over the next decade or so. Usually business owners or executives. So you got entrepreneurial kind of people that are in this space. They support, I'm really sorry to tell you this, I like to joke and say they're cheating on you, but they're probably giving to 2 to 6 other nonprofits. And I think the number right now is actually 6.5. That number's gone up a little bit. That most mids and majors are giving to probably 6 other organizations. So this becomes a big factor in knowing our donors and how we approach end of the year giving.
Hey, Mike, question about that. Is it possible, and maybe you've got data on this, maybe not, is it possible that I could be a major donor to one organization and a mid-level to a couple of others. Do you see that pattern of behavior, or is there much data on that?
Yeah, and it's interesting if you do any sort of work, of data warehousing, comparing your data with other organizations, which is really shocking because sometimes you'll find out a donor is giving you $1,000, but they're giving someone else 50, and you say, "Oh, well, how do we become their top charity?" So that's really important. People can be mid, or they might, depending on what your offering is. If it was like if you work for an organization that does like a premium. And you might have said to them, or you're a monthly giving organization, your offer may have been, if you give us $50, we'll send you this book. Or your offer may have been, give $40 a month. Because that's what you asked for, that's what they gave. But another organization knows them as a major donor. So it's very possible there's people sitting in your database that have a lot more capacity than you think.
Yeah, that's good.
They want to be engaged through multiple channels of communication. If you're only sending mail to people, try to figure out how you can broaden out and start talking about email. How do you digitally engage with people, live events, phone? Every organization looks different, but there's different ways that we can engage with people along the way.
Good.
So let me read this. Middle donors should be viewed as a central part of an organization. Lifetime value efforts. Middle donors will be retained and upgraded far more than smaller donors and far more than major donors. So retention on mid-levels is a big deal. You want to pay attention to these people. We can keep them around for a long time. They represent the most significant block of money, commitment, and loyalty. So what we're trying to tell you here is like, there's a lot of money in that mid-level space and people that can give to your organization, but they're also people that are passionate about your organization. And that's what I'm always key about. We want to unashamedly raise as much money as possible to do the work that we've been called to do, but you also want to match passion with passion. And what we've learned about mid-levels is they're the people that are committed and loyal to your organization. So here's a couple take action items for you. First, if you haven't done this, discover how many donors that are in your database that give between $1,000 and $5,000 and they're not on a major donor rep caseload. So let me break that down because I know there's different size organizations here. You can slide that bar one way or the other. So we say 1,000 to 5,000. If you're an organization who has 1,000 donors, move that scale this way and go, okay, we're going to start paying attention to people who give 250 to 1,000. And then we're going to do 1,000 plus as major. So you can move that scale. There's nothing magic about the 1,000 to 5,000. If you're a larger organization, you may want to move the spot to, or mid-levels are 1,000 to 10,000, and then 10,000 plus is a major donor, because you may be sending a rep on the road to go visit that person, and you don't really want to spend that money unless they're giving significantly or have potential to do so. So look at your file, draw the line. So you got major donors are up here. Draw the line wherever you call your major donors, whether it's, let's say it's 5,000 plus or major donors. Then come down here and say, okay, now we've got these people that are under $500, or I'm mixing the numbers around on purpose because I know we have different size organizations. So bring your bar down here and then look how many donors are in this middle section. So if you're a middle size organization, I would say, go look and see how many people are giving between $1,000 and $5,000 a year. Not just as a single gift, but how many are giving between 1,000 and 5,000 per year, and then see how many of those people that you're contacting. We'll dive into that in a little bit. Then second, create a demographic profile. And some of this, you may have to do some phone calling. You may look up in the database. You can find out some of these things right away. Some of them you'll have to figure out over time. So you can look at the list there, but age and gender, you'd like to know what they do as a profession, see if what I said is true, that a lot of them are women and a lot of them are CEOs or business owners or executives, that sort of thing. What's their geographic location? Are they all located in your city because you're a local organization? If you're a national organization, which cities are the ones that you have the most major and mid-level donors in? As we look at cities, then you can kind of say, okay, we might want to focus on these 3 cities where we have a lot of people and maybe do a mid-level event. A lot of this demographic stuff will tell you kinds of things we should do. What kind of passions do they have? Education level. You can add to that list, but you get the point. You want to find out about your, how many people are in this space, and then who are they?
Hey, Mike, can I just reiterate? I know we've got, to your point, folks from all different size organizations. And I put a plug out on social media about this, but I think that first step is really critical, regardless of if you're a one-person organization or one-person development effort or an entire department and team. It's still important to segment that list so you know how you're going to allocate. If you're a one-man show, how are you going to allocate your time? So who am I going to go visit with personally, and now who am I going to spend this time kind of getting to know that might be that mid-level donor? Because when you start talking about some of the demographic information, it is very similar to major donors. So to your point, there are some hidden major donors even in this mid-level list.
Yep, that's good. Okay, so where do I start? It's going to look a little bit different for everybody. You've got to discover where's the right place to start. So we're going to talk about a few different ideas on where you start. And I'm going to put a little bit of time really on phone calling, because even in today's world, it's a little more difficult in today's world where everybody's got their phones telling them who's calling. And if you don't recognize the number, you send it off to voicemail, right? But I still think calling as you can open up that door is a really important way to make that first step towards mid-levels. So starting a mid-level donor program, first define who your mid-level donors are. We just talked about that. So high fives for doing that research already. I'm sure you've already got it sorted out. Second, tailor your mail and digital communications to mid-level donors. So what do we mean by this? You know that you've got, if what we just said was mid-levels are some of your most loyal people, you want to start talking to them that way. So for example, if I have a $25 donor and I say something like, because you're such a committed donor to our organization, they're going to read that and go, I'm not committed to your organization. I gave you 25 bucks. But if you have somebody who's giving $1,000 and has done that multiple times, or $250 and given that multiple times, we can start segmenting our mail and writing that in a way which is simple to do. Just, pull out your mid-level donors and say, great, I'm going to write 3 lines in this mail piece that really talk about a mid-level donor to say, hey, because you're such a faithful donor to our organization, we wanted to give you this information. We wanted to tell you this special story. So you can start writing in a way. It's even simpler to do in digital communications where you can make those changes pretty simple. Or you could start sending, to one part of the file, just start making them more personal communications. Dear Mike, thank you so much. We know that you're a committed donor to this organization and we wanted to share this story with you. It's got a better feeling to it than sending something out that just says, dear friend, here's what we've done this last month. So you can really start tailoring some of those digital communications, and not just the way you write, what you send as well. So you could actually choose certain communications that you would send to a mid-level donor file. And I know this webinar is not about me helping you segment your file and all that, but simply you could have major donors, mid-level donors, general donors, and then monthly givers. If you segment them out that way, then you can start creating a grid of which communications go to which group of donors. And even if a person is a mid-level and they're a monthly giver, you might have a different sort of communication than you would if somebody's just a major donor. So I would encourage you to start segmenting your file, look at who they are and what they're giving to, and then you can figure out what are the best kinds of communications to go to a mid-level.
That's good.
Personal notes showing gratitude. This is a huge deal I don't know how you are, but anytime I get a handwritten note still today, everybody thinks snail mail is old, but I'm telling you, if I get a handwritten note, even if it's a birthday card from my mom every year, I go, oh, sweet. I got something with, somebody actually wrote the name on it. This is the best ever. Yeah. So I think writing notes to people, sending personal emails, not something that's just a mass email, but a personal email to thank somebody, or pick up the phone and call them and say, thanks for giving. It's a huge deal. Show them when their donation's making an impact. So we've got to report back. Most ministries are, honestly, I don't know, you can take your temperature. We have a slide later called Take Your Temperature. You can take your temperature on this one, but how do you do reporting back? Some people are great at it. Some people are terrible at it. A lot of us ride somewhere on the edge of terrible, trying not to be terrible. But it's one of those things where when you take a donor's money and they say, yes, I'll give $1,000, yes, I'll give $2,000 towards this project or program that you're implementing, we need to go back and say, here's what we did and here's how successful it was. So start thinking about ways that you can report back and show impact. Yep. Another thing you do is give special access. So I'll give you one example here. You might set something up like this, like a webinar. Easily on Zoom, you could set up a webinar and say 2 times a year, we're going to give our mids and majors special access to the CEO to give a report, or the State of the Union, or whatever you want to do. Give some sort of report, give a passionate report about we were building a school in India, and here's what happened, and here's a picture of it, and talking about the update, and really getting people excited about it. It's amazing what you can do when you get people connected personally, and they go, wow, I can connect with the executive director or the CEO or something like that. Give them special access to things like that, or to events where you can meet a person, meet somebody in person. Everybody's different on how you function. Some are regional, some are city, some are national. So everybody has different limitations, but find ways to give special access to good donors. And then lastly, which we're going to spend some time on here, which is develop a calling program. I believe in these big time, and it's a calling program, but there's other aspects to it that we'll chat about.
Hey, Mike, can we go back to that slide just one back? Yeah. So if I am sitting in a small organization and it's just me, or maybe me and one other staff person, and I know the calling program is important. So I can only pick to spend my time. I only have so much time. If I'm going to pick from those other 5 things, where do I start? What's most important? Where do you think it warrants spending some
time? I would say the first thing to do is personal contact. So anything that equals personal contact with the donor, pick up the phone, write a note, make yourself a discipline at the end or the beginning of every single day. You're going to pick not just the 5 gifts that came in of $5,000, but I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to make it my practice that I'm going to write a personal note, leave a voice message, make a call, write an email, whatever it is. Say, I'm going to do 10 donors a day.
Yep.
Or if your organization warrants it, do 15 a day or 10 a week. Do just whatever that next first step is, but it's personal contact. That's what it is trying to take the first steps to develop a relationship. The other things are good, but nothing's going to up a person's giving and keep them around like personal communication.
Yep, love it. That's great. Thanks.
So let's talk about the calling. And this might be, and I'll talk about different ways that we've done this before based on the size of the organization, but you might be, maybe you have mid-level callers and you're trying to figure out how to use them better. Maybe you have customer service people that you can convert into that. Maybe it's just you, and it's really just getting on your calendar to go, hey, I'm going to take 10 hours a week, or I'm going to take 2 hours a week. Start somewhere. I'm going to take 2 hours a week and I'm just going to make a list and I'm going to call these people. So we can all start somewhere. So I would say invest as little as 10 hours a week if you want to bring, if you've got staff to do it. If you're the only person in your shop, and saying you're like, you gotta be kidding me, I do everything. I have 80 hours. How am I gonna put 10 more in? That's 90. I would say, start somewhere and do what you can do. Cut something out, evaluate yourself and say, cut something out that's not as important as connecting personally with your donors. And just say, I'm gonna spend 2 hours every week, block it off on your calendar and start making phone calls. Just smile and dial, as I say. Pick up the phone. If all you can do is leave messages at first, it's great. Once people get to know you, they'll probably start picking up the phone. One of the things we did in an organization is we used senior leaders. So we didn't have money to go hire a mid-level calling person. So we, as an executive leadership team, this was probably for a $4 or $5 million organization, we just decided, let's just add some donors to our list and let's make this happen. So we all took on about 20 or 30 of the best donors. So we took, 100 donors, split them amongst 5 people on a leadership team, and we all managed those 20 donors. And then we had some people coming in and out of the caseload, but we decided, okay, we're gonna start reaching out to our donors and saying thanks and sharing stories of impact. So that's one way to do it, is just split them up amongst team members you have and say, hey, we had our CFO on the phone making phone calls as well. I mean, now let's be honest, not all CFOs you want to hand the phone to and say call donors, right? There's some CFOs that can pull it off. We had a great one, so we let him talk to donors once in a while.
That's awesome.
Hire a rep. If you're an organization, you're of a certain size, it's worth it to hire a rep. You're talking about this chunk of people in the middle that are giving significantly to the organization. You can find new major donors and you can keep people around for a long period of time in the middle. It's worth hiring a rep, even if it's a part-time. For so many organizations that I've worked with, we've started by hiring somebody working from home 20 hours a week and just said, here's what you're going to do. Connect with them every month, tell them here's what your process is for the month and what you're going to work on, set them into action and let them go. Got to find the right person that can do that. But that's a job. I'm not advocate for every job working from home, but that one's one that can happen that way because you can easily keep track of have you done the work that you're supposed to do along the way.
That's good.
So with hiring a rep, you're going to get increased retention, longer term donors.
Hey, Mike, how do you feel about a volunteer doing that in an organization?
Yeah, I think it depends. I'll address a couple things on this because I think we've maybe even gotten into this in the book, which is sometimes some of your best mid-level contact people are a family member because they already know the organization frontwards and backwards. You're talking about it, especially if you're a small team, you're talking about it all the time. A family member might be a great person. I always tell people, don't hire a family member unless you're willing to fire them. So it's like, you got to be in a spot where it's like, okay, if I'm gonna bring somebody on and they're not doing a good job, or you're gonna have someone else manage them, you gotta release, you gotta let it go and say, hey, manage this person. But so that's one. I mean, it's talking about volunteers. You could use a family member who's willing to do that, or somebody who really cares deeply for the organization, especially thank you calls.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to start there. I'd much rather have a person who kind of like, this is what they do and they're held accountable to what they do. But if you can start somewhere and at least have somebody thank people for gifts, the thank you calls, absolutely on volunteers, I think it's fine. But sometimes you got to make sure that they're educated on the organization or they'll get questions, they won't know the answers.
Right. Okay, cool.
Here's a couple. I think this is helpful if you get calling people. Some people are great on the phone, some people aren't. It's just how it is. I can talk, which sounds funny because I'm talking the whole time on this, but you get me on the phone or in a conversation and I'm kind of like, I'm very to the point. So I'll go, all right, well, I think we've talked about all we need to here. Let's roll. Where my wife was from small town, I like every major donor event I go to, I'm like, I got to have her along because she'll carry the conversation. She always say she really likes people and people think, hey, you don't, but she just one of those people that just wants to know, hey, what's happening? Tell us about it. She never runs out of things to say. I just feel like I run out of stuff to say and then I feel awkward. So I like to write down questions if I'm going to talk to somebody on the phone to say, okay, ask these things so you don't get stuck and be in an awkward spot. So I think it's good to be tuned into the donor, not just about the charity. So one of the things I'm going to tell you here on this first point is if you're making a first call to a donor, make sure they know what organization you're calling from. Other than that, the best thing you can do on a first call is not talk about the organization, get the donor talking about themselves. If you can get a donor talking about themselves and the whole time, you never talk about the organization, the programs of the organization or any of that stuff, but you get them talking about themselves, they're going to walk away as long as they know who you called from. Because you don't want to be like a commercial. You're like, that was a really cool commercial, but I have no idea who it was.
Right.
Get them talking about themselves. They're going to walk away from the call thinking that was the best call I've ever had. Those people really care about me. And then the next time you call, you can start digging into some other things.
Well, and you know what strikes me about that, Mike, is that's what we encourage folks to do with major donors. In a mid-level effort, you're just on the phone instead of face-to-face. Mm-hmm. So it's similar, your relationship building, right? You're trying to get to know the donor just like you would be in a major donor call or conversation. It's just a different venue or vehicle to communicate.
Yep, that's great. So what are the questions? You want to ask donors questions to get to know them. One of those you can ask, what do you like about what the nonprofit's doing? It might open some doors. The favorite question I have is number 2 here, which is, what inspired you to give? If you can ask that question, I mean, I use that all the time. Why did you give? What made you give to our organization? the person right there, it opens up the door for 3,000 questions, because they might say, oh, well, you were at our church, and oh, what church do you go to? Oh, what town is that in? You just found out where they're from. If you don't already know, you just found out what kind of church they go to. And they might say, oh, I was sitting with my daughter at church. Oh, that's great. How old are you? How old's your daughter? You have other kids? Oh, that's you just, and you're writing down notes. So that way, the next time you call this person, you can go, oh man, last time we were talking about this and this. And you start really creating a genuine relationship with somebody, and showing that we really care about the donor. So there's, write down questions, pick things that work for you and work for your organization. Write down those questions so you think about those things. If you're like me, you need to write those down. If you're somebody who's more like my wife, she's like, what do I need questions for? I just want to talk to the person.
This happens.
Communicating with mid-level donors. Here's a couple of key items that we want to work on when we communicate with mids. We want to thank them, obviously. Thanks, you can never say thanks too much to people. Second, affirm them in their giving, because sometimes people give a gift and then if they don't hear from you, they think like, well, did I do the right thing? You want to affirm that gift and tell them, hey, because you gave, here's what we're going to be able to do. Here's what you enabled. If you can train yourself to speak in this language of like, here's what you did by giving $1,000, that's a lot different than thanks for giving me $1,000 and here's what I'm going to do with it. That's a different message. If you can train yourself to speak in a way to affirm them, to say, by you giving $1,000, you empowered a child to go to school, or whatever your nonprofit is, but really affirm them in their giving, tell stories, that sort of thing. Then inform them. We talked a little bit about this, so I won't spend a ton of time, but make sure that you're informing donors. Tell them what their gift did. Tell them what kind of impact they're having. And that's, you can give a short stat and that's fine, like, hey, 1 million people, but then boil that down to a story of one person. Because that's where somebody's going to go, oh, I get it. I see the impact that my donation's having. So make sure that we thank, affirm, and inform donors of what's happening. So here's a couple of take action items for you. Thanking donors. So using principles that you've learned in this section, send thank you notes. So here's something simple for you to do. Like I said, I like to be practical. You can walk away with this. So going, some of you might be going, no, don't make me write notes or don't make me call, but nope, we're making it happen. It's like a school teacher, right? Nope, got to do your homework. So here's homework. Go write notes to 10 people. So get off this call, not yet, but get off this call when we're at the end. Go write notes to 10 people that you haven't thanked. Go do like I said, draw the line. Okay, we pay attention to these major donors that are up here. Draw the line, pick the next 10 people on your database and say, I'm going to write a personal note to 10 people I've never written to before and see what happens. The other thing you can do is call. Do what I just said. Take a couple of the questions that I just gave you there. Just go go look up in your database, draw the line, like I said, go call 5 people. And just practice on the call, tell them if they ask questions about the nonprofit, great. But really what you want to do is just find out about them. Who's the donor? It's part of the process of going, hey, we want to know who our donors are. So find out about them. Ask a bunch of questions. What do you do for work? And, tell me about your family. Just ask some questions like that and really get to know your donors. So here's a couple things. We've gone through these, but we're getting towards the end here. So I want to just give you a little bit of a thing to take your temperature. All right. Take the temperature of your nonprofit. We've already talked about this, and here's a good grid for you. How many of your donors fall into these categories? So if you're a larger nonprofit, how many donors fall in the 1,000 to 10,000 largest single gift, 0 to 24 months? Now, slide your scale. If you're a smaller organization, slide that and say, okay, how many have given between 250 and 1,000, or 250 and 500, whatever that scale is, move it down wherever you need to be to say, okay, well, we pay attention to 1,000 plus. Well, what's the next level down you're not paying attention to? Look at 500 to 1,000 over 24 months, see what's in there. Don't just look at largest single gift though, also look at cumulative giving. You may have a monthly giving program of $40 that puts them at $480. So they missed the mark of a mid-level because they're giving, month to month, but they might have given an extra gift. So also do a cumulative. So if you're sliding the scale to, 250 to 750 is my mid-level, then what you might want to do is then say, okay, or they gave between 500 and 1,500 cumulative over the year. So put a couple factors in there and pull that file and see how much you're communicating with those people. So see how many donors you have in there, and then how much are you communicating with those people. So that's that last box on there. On average, how many times have you connected with these donors in the last 12 months? Some of you will go, once you get this stat, some of you will go, gosh, we're really doing well. And some of you will tuck your head like a dog that just, is in trouble and go, oh boy, I got to start talking to my donors a little bit more. So
what's our goal there, Mike? What's the goal? How many times should I connect with those mid-level donors?
Yeah, great question. I think mid-levels, it depends where you are. Do what you can, but ideally, I would say we want to contact those people that are giving in the mid-level range once a quarter.
Okay.
That can be phone, email, sending a card, sending a note to them, some sort of personal communication, some sort of high impact communication, once a quarter. Especially if they're engaged. If it's a person who only gives end of the year, you can back that off a little bit, but once a quarter is ideal.
Good. Okay.
What percentage of your income comes from these donors? So do a little research. Like I talked about, we looked at our organizations and said, man, this organization, a third of their income is coming from mid-level donors. We've got to amp up our mid-level efforts. There's one organization right now that is working on the radio, and they're doing they have a partner on the radio. They're doing $1,000 ask on the radio, and they've just started pouring mid-levels into their organization. So we've had to scale mid-level operations with them. Wherever, look and see what that chunk is, and then give them an appropriate amount of time. And you can also start trying to work a process to upgrade some of your generals to mids as well. What systems do you have in place to respond quickly? So do you have systems in place to let donors know, or for you to know when a donor gives a larger gift? That's an important one for you to be able to raise a flag in your database, or get a report sent to you weekly or daily or something like that. You can see those. And then after that, how quickly are you responding? Because if you can respond to people that come on with a gift of $1,000, you know how awesome it is to give $1,000 and get a call the next day? That makes you, as a donor, that freaks you out.
You feel noticed, right? You feel noticed. Like that's $1,000. Who takes $1,000 lightly when you're writing it out of your personal checking account, right? So it's nice to know when you write a check like that somebody noticed.
Yeah.
It's good.
There's a shocking stat that came out last year on a mid-level study that said only about, it was 8 or 9% of people ever contacted a person who gave a gift of $1,000. So in research, they gave $1,000 to 30 some different organizations to see how they would respond. Only 8 or 9% of them communicated back and actually called the person.
So I actually just wrote a blog post on that. It was Next After who did that research, and I'm sending that study out to folks just because it's pretty shocking how it was crickets after those kinds of checks were written. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. How timely is your reporting back to the donor? We've talked about that, but just make sure that if you say, hey, we're doing this project in December, in January, you should probably send something to donors to say, hey, here's what we did and here's how it performed. So you can tell people what their money's doing.
Hey, Mike, I just got a question. How do you break down gift reporting into specific details?
Gift reporting into specific details. Does that mean segmenting your database, or are you talking about like
Yeah, let's go with that. I'm going to ask for some clarity here. Reporting back to the donor. So I think maybe what the question is how do what do I report back? So if it's $1,000 donation and nothing was accomplished with just that $1,000, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do I link it to impact? How do I link their contribution to real impact? Is it just a matter of being a part of something bigger? What do I share?
Yeah, I think the way that you do that is you talk to them about what project they gave their donation to. If they gave to a general fund, then your answer back can be, what does the organization do? Are you educating children? Are you building orphanages? Are you, whatever your cause is, then you want to go back with, and if you can break that to a dollar handle, it's really helpful. So you can say, hey, with $500, we were able to do 6 of these. That's really helpful. If it's like a big project that's $100,000 project and they were part of it, then I would report back by saying your $500 gift enabled us to build this building. They know it's a $100,000 project, but hey, it was $100,000 to build a school. You say, because of donors like you, we were able to build this school. Here's a picture of it. Here's the impact it's having on children's lives.
Yep. Good. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Next slide. Create a list of ways your organization can invest. So here, this is really talking specifically about calling. So we talked about these. I'm going to go through this quick. Staff member to work a caseload. We talked about that. You could use part of your time. If you're the executive director, you can use part of someone else's time, potentially a volunteer that you really trust. That's some way to get on the phone, is trying to find some sort of time that you can use. Executive leadership, managing a handful. We talked about that, just some reminders on how you can take action now to go and start having some communication with people that are giving significantly. Or outbound caller from your customer service, or hire somebody to come in and be an outbound caller, really reaching out. If you've got the number of people in your database that justifies an outbound caller, go for it. So last thing here, whatever size your nonprofit might be, start somewhere. Reach out to mid-level donors. Everybody can start somewhere. Hopefully we've given enough examples along the way, whether you're small or you're a large organization. You might be a large organization that's focusing on major donors, but you haven't really done much with mids. Go hire somebody. Instead of hiring another major donor rep, hire a mid-level rep that's going to start pushing people up to majors. If you're an organization of one, then put on your calendar 2 hours during this week. Challenge you to put 2 hours on your calendar this week that you're not just going to reach out to the 10 people that you know that give $5,000 and more, but go, okay, who are the next group of people in the database I haven't reached out to? There might be some gold in there. Yeah. There might be people that have potential to give $10,000. We just never talked to them. There might be people that have potential to stay around for a long time and keep giving $1,000 gifts. We just need to reach out. So put 2 hours on your schedule. You know, in 2 hours, you're probably not going to get a hold of that many people. You can leave a lot of messages, write some notes, but you can probably reach out to 50 people in that 2 hours and leave messages and you'll be reaching a lot deeper in your database. Just start somewhere on mids.
That's good. Hey, Mike, quick question for you. So this is not, your list is not going to be a static list, right? You get new people in all the time. People are adjusting. Life happens. They go up or down in the list. How frequently do you recommend kind of reevaluating the individual segments, donor segments?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is one caseload management is a big part of, if you're a mid-level rep or trying to sort out which people you should manage. So I've always referred to it as kind of like helps me visually, top, middle, and bottom of the caseload. Right. Where I say like the top are those group of the mid-level donors that you've had a relationship with. Once you establish your mid-level program, or you are established, you're going to have this top group that are like the 50 people on your caseload that they know. They pick up the phone when you call. They know who you are. You like to call them because you have a relationship and they're actually going to pick up the phone. So it's that group of people that have been around for years. You're developing good relationship. You've got two-way communication going on. That's that top. That middle chunk is people that like, maybe they pick up the phone or they don't pick up the phone, but when you write a letter, they actually give a bigger gift. So you go, yeah, I'm going to keep them on the caseload and keep trying to work that relationship. And some of those are probably going to churn on and off. And then I say the bottom of the caseload is two different kinds of people. One, they're prospects. They're people that you think have potential, or they gave a gift, but you've never been able to communicate with them so far. So you're going to see what kind of communication you can get and then go from there. There are also people on the bottom that are just like you've never been able to get a hold of. They're kind of like they might have given in the past, but they're people that probably need to come off. So usually what I do is say a couple times a year, pick a couple down times in your schedule, which is not going to be December. It might be, beginning of February or something like that, is one of the times where you say, okay, I'm going to evaluate, I'm going to clean up my caseload or clean up the people that I consider mid-level donors. And you're going to knock some people off the list, bring some new people on, especially after the beginning of the year. February is a great time. January, we're doing a lot of thanking. February gives you a little downtime where you can look at the list and go, we got new givers I need to add on and clear off the the ones that aren't giving, and then probably pick another time in the summer or some, one of those great months like July or August where donors don't give as much, and also clean up your list then.
That's awesome. Thank you, sir. I appreciate all of your just not only theoretical kind of experience that and information and knowledge that you've shared, but also very practical steps. I think that anybody listening, large or small, has some takeaway things that they can go do. So I would encourage those of you still engaged with us today and those listening at a later date, right now, begin that process of writing notes. I think Mike said to 10 people, write a note and call 5. That's something you can do by the end of next week for sure. Maybe you can even do it by the end of this week. So just make that your goal. That's your first step. Once you've done that, then you can develop a little bit more of a strategy. So thank you, Mike. I appreciate your time. For the rest of you, I'd encourage you to mark your calendar, circle October 30th on your calendar, put that in your phone. We are going to be joining some folks from Masterworks and talking with them about recurring donor-based, recurring giving, and those monthly givers who really we're kind of dealing with a little bit different situation in a subscription economy. We are used to, I know for myself, I have an Amazon subscription of some toiletry type items that appear on my doorstep on a monthly basis. So that is what our donors are used to. They're in a consumer economy, so how we can relate with them better when it comes to their recurring giving. So it really is a privilege for us here at the Signatory to partner with like-minded subject matter experts who are willing to generously share their expertise and their knowledge on nonprofit development, marketing, and fundraising. Please pass this information along to someone else. I will be sending this recap out in an email tomorrow. Play it again. Certainly before we head into fourth quarter, I am confident there can be some additional mid-level cultivation that happens in fourth quarter just with some of the steps that Mike suggested today. And certainly as you begin to build strategy for 2020, you can begin to develop some of these really key strategies into your overall development strategy. And as always, the Signatory is here to partner with you. We want to come alongside and help you in those donor conversations and help you feel equipped and confident as you enter into those conversations. So I look forward to seeing you again here on October 30th. Thanks so much for all the work that you are doing to make your community and our world a better place.